What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Absolute Auction Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Miner. Joining me is my good friend, Mark. As we wait for the screen to go. Mark, what's going on? How you doing, man?
Oh, it's good as always out here. It's I've had my first couple of startup drafts. Unfortunately, no startup auctions yet, but had a few. My first Dynasty startup here this past week, kind of kick off. So Dynasty time is here. It's flowing. So we're hoping we can help some people out.
Yeah, and that's what the show is going to be actually really about, is about helping people out of, the in-draft type of things that go on, knowing your limits. Like, what is the true limitations? And, like, one thing I've been trying to search out, to try to see, what can we do better to help people out is everything I keep finding of everyone is prep, the preparation to go into the draft. But nothing out there is showing anything to, really get you in the draft moment, because we're in that draft, you're in that feeling, you're trying to know what to do, like understand the whole everything that's going on around you. It's like you're on the clock the whole entire time from the very beginning to the very end of your draft. And that's what's fun about auctions, is you're always on. But like I said, there's nothing that truly gives you that detail that people are looking for. And tonight, that's what we're going to be doing here tonight. We're going to be giving them in draft details of what to do to help them, dominate their drafts, feel that they did really good, coming in, leave in the same way. You want that feel good feeling. You don't want to feel like, man, I did this when I should have did that, or I overpaid for this guy. Why did I do that? We're going to be here to help you with that.
100%.
So be sure, follow the show at Absolute Auction Pod on Twitter or X. Follow Mark at Primetime Mock, and follow myself at Ryan Miner _FFB. And also, if you guys ever have any questions, if you don't have Twitter or X, feel free and email us at absoluteauctionpod@gmail.com. All right, Mark. So kicking it off, our in-draft theory is preparation of going in. When you prep for your draft and you're walking in that day, what are you walking into your draft with? Like, what do you have? What are your items that you bring with you outside of something to drink?
So really, I'm just making sure that I have my tiers, my rankings for every position. I have my position groups basically ranked in loose tiers. We've talked about them plenty in the past season of the show, but I usually do everything by platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. And then that kind of gives me an idea of what I'm willing to spend on the player, just kind of based on where they are in that pecking order, how many are available, how many spots are available in your draft, how many dollars you're spending in your draft. So it kind of that allows me to figure out how I want to spend my dollars on players. And then I have usually my par sheet or my budget, which for the most part is kind of just a few different tables of different scenarios I have in my head. What if I make my nucleus out of 65% of my budget to versus 70 versus 75% of my budget, and then like what does my back end look like that if I'm doing that as well. So I have a table of different percentages and prices and what they would look like in terms of players that I've spent money on. I have my tier sheet, and those are the two big prep pieces that I feel like. There are also, if you are doing like a salary cap auction kind of dynasty league, it's important to also have the prices of everybody else's rosters and all of their, all the player, if they have assets that they have on their books, you want to make sure all those players, which players are available in the pool as opposed to players that are already contracted. But for the most part, it's really just it's knowing what I want, the prices that I like, and then it's knowing what kind of I'm willing to spend, and then any information I can get on the rest of my league mates, whether it be information from a contract league where they have their rosters, or just knowing what I know about them. Do they like to spend on quarterbacks? Do they like to spend on running backs? Whatever it ends up being, just having kind of a good understanding and good notes taken on that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, dude. I'm like about the same way. Like I usually walk in with a multiple par sheets. I usually do it on my laptop, so I have a Google sheet of I'll do like studs and scrubs. I'll do if I go wide receiver heavy, do I go top QB? Like, what's that kind of range go for? I kind of put a whole bunch of scenarios together to see which one I kind of like, and then I can also kind of shift it as I'm in draft to understand like which way am I going, and I'm like, do I really want to go that way? And then I try to like readjust on the fly. So it's like you're trying to do two things at once, but it's the excitement I like there of trying to do it, of trying to figure out one of the 5 sheets that I have, which one is my favorite one to go off of, and try to stay on that path. And then same thing with the tiers. It's like I'll have my list of players and tiers, and I try to like make sure like when doing them, it's like these tiers are. All right, I don't. If I nominate them, I want to be that first guy to nominate them. I don't want to be the last guy to nominate them because knowing how those tiers can happen, that guy that's in that high tier and it's the last player available, you're going to be spending more on them than whatever amount of players you had in that top tier. So that's one thing I'd be careful about when it comes to nominations. But that's definitely the fun side of it. You're in it. The excitement is starting. But now we're in the draft. We're trying to figure out what to do with players and like understanding anything of what's going on. And then you look at it like what you're trying to understand. Like you're reading a room, right? Like I always read the room to see what people are doing and kind of get an idea of what is going on around me to see like, hey, what's this guy do? What's that guy doing? Like, and you kind of wonder because some people look at you like, what are you doing? And I always like to say, well, what I was actually doing is I was watching all you guys because I kind of want to know the knowledge of all of you to understand, what is going on? What's your bidding strategies? What kind of players are you going after? Are you a high roller where you just want to blow it all? Or are you trying to do something who is just trying to see who's like sits back quietly and watches? It's kind of hard to figure out. Like, how much do you study your league mates when they are drafting?
For the most part, I'd say that I'm using the draft to learn about them. If I'm in a completely cold room with players that I've never drafted with before, I am usually gonna still play my game, right? I'm not gonna sacrifice making sure that I can draft the best team that I possibly can. But I'm also not going out of my way to bid up players that I don't know. Um, I'm not necessarily even taking a few bids as gospel. Really, I think a full draft gives a pretty good idea. The more you draft with the player, the more you're going to pick up. So you're always paying attention. You always want to sort of audit what happened after the fact, go through all the draft data, who drafted what, where, what they spent, and compile that over however many years you're drafting with that room. So you're always learning. You do have to have some action, right? You have to create action yourself and you have to make your bids and you have to build your team. But especially early on, I'm usually keeping my cards close to the vest as best I can. Having a podcast now, I guess, is kind of counterproductive to that because I'm giving out the information that I would most likely have on a regular basis. But I'm really trying to stay on the conservative side of bidding. I'm trying to stay close to what my budget on my par sheet says when I go into the draft. Obviously, like we just said, it can be adjusted, and you're still going to have to do that because every draft is different, and you're going to have wins and losses, and you might make some mistakes along the way. It's always going to happen. Um, but really, I'm trying to go with a more disciplined approach because I am so unfamiliar with the players. And I'm just using that first draft to learn as much as I can so I can take that back and try some other strategies afterwards.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I've done drafts where I've been brand new in the room. Like all of us have never played one fantasy league with each other at all, and I just kind of like I'll hold my par sheet close to me, keep it looking at it, keep trying to adjust it, saying like, okay, maybe I can shift this play around because I see the tendencies are starting to shift this way, or vice versa. Where like, okay, that let's just say like super flex that quarterback position, I'm not going to be able to afford that now. I'm going to go ahead and drop down to my next tier, and I'm going to start going this way with it. So it's one good way to kind of understand, just kind of sit back and almost like see how the draft falls to you in a way. And I hate doing that sometimes because sometimes you miss out, but sometimes when you think you're missing out, there's that bid that comes in, and then you get a solid like buy on a certain player, and you're like, man, I can't believe I got him for that cheap. As we'll say like you get Baker Mayfield for $19, a good quarterback, but the guy that is all mad at you, he spent $34 on Josh Allen. Is Josh Allen worth that much more? Fantasy wise, possibly, but when you're building your team at like this, it's kind of hard to say, yeah, that was well worth the value of it. You know?
Yeah, sure. That's absolutely.
And then like you're getting the rest of your roster all put together. You figure it all out from there, and then you're good to go. You're like the next thing you know, you got your whole roster full, and then how do you feel at the end of it? Are you happy? Are you sad? Once you understand your league mates, you're actually more prepared for your next season of doing the draft, especially if you do like another type of like, hey, we're gonna do another auction draft. You guys want to do it? Yes, because now I know what Mark likes to do. Mark likes to sit there and watch, let's see what's going on around him. But when I start seeing him bid, like, what's he really bidding on? Is it worth bidding? Is it worth me bidding on it? I'd be more curious.
Actually, I don't like to sit and watch. I usually am early and aggressive in the action, even when I am in a room. Not because I'm not watching and learning. You still can do that. But I also usually like to try and build my nucleus as early as I can, and then kind of work my way back to having some money on the back end of my draft. So usually I'm pushing forward, but that's not, again, it's not something that I'm doing because I don't know my league, like, or I do or don't know my league mates. It's just kind of my general strategy. I think everyone's going to have a general philosophy when they go into a draft. Yours is going to be different than mine. Mine's going to be different than the next person's. It's going to go down the line like that. And I usually play kind of aggressively, but by comparison, I would say in a draft where I am meeting new players, I am going to try and pull back how I do what I'm doing. For the most part, I'm not trying to overbid on players. I'm going to try and just keep them right at value and not go too far over it. And that can be giving a lot of information away, but it also can just be, it could just work to your advantage. Sometimes just playing your game works to your advantage because the other people don't know who you are either.
No, solid input there, man. You're right. I mean, there's sometimes I like to be aggressive, but there's also the other side of me that likes to kind of just sit back and relax. It's like, I want to have fun. If I know how these players are drafting, like when we were doing our drafts over the summer, I knew how you and Adam were kind of drafting. So I knew kind of what I could do. I was like, you know what? I can do it like this and that, and let's see how they do it. And then I get a player I didn't want, and Josh Allen, but in the long run, it paid off.
Right.
All right, man. That's going to do it for this episode. Any last words, Mark, or are we good to wrap up?
No, I just think always be learning, always be watching, no matter how you're going to play your game, whether it's fast or slow.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you guys soon. Take care. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Absolute Auction Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Miner. With me is good friend Mark Shue. Mark, what is going on, my man?
Not much, man. It's just been, it's been a good time out here. And we're back for some more. We're back for some more Dynasty content, some more bidding action. I'm ready to get into it.
Right? So we gave the last episode, our in-draft theory, we're walking into drafts with. This episode, we're looking more into... Actually, I can edit that part out. Hang on. We're going to start all over again.
Hold on. Yeah, I don't even think you need to... Let's just get right into the question right off the bat. I think that's an easier way to jump right in.
Okay.
Just a suggestion.
I don't know. I'm looking at it right now. All right. So one of the good questions is we're just starting the first round of the draft. You threw your nomination out there. I threw my nomination out there. The next guy throws his nomination out there, and we're wondering: does nominating a random player before parameters and precedents are set worth it? Like, what that means is it throwing out like a wide receiver number 19 or RB 24 really going to make that huge of a difference right now in a draft compared to trying to say throw out like a Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley type a name?
Simply put, no, it's not. Generally, I think you want to have a reason for everything that you're doing, and that includes your nominations. Your first nomination out of the gate should not be a random player. It just shouldn't. I actually feel like the early part of the auction draft, when the market is not set, is probably one of the more valuable places to land good players or players for good dollar values, because people are still holding on to their money. So especially if you're an early part of that first round, I would have a few top tier players in my queue that I think maybe are a little underrated compared to the market, compared to whatever consensus you're looking at. Because you know that there's always going to be a top five, and there's always going to be some solid players at 1, 2, and 3 at a lot of different positions, and then maybe there's 4 or 5 sitting out there, and they might not be that much different, but just you have maybe a rosier opinion on some of them than others. You take the ones you believe in, and you have those as your kind of first ideas for nominations, and see if you can get them and kind of sneak under the radar while people are saving their dollars for. Last year it was CD Lamb, and maybe you can get Jamar Chase for a little bit less than you were going to be doing. Or last year, same thing with Joe Burrow. Like you could have put Joe Burrow out there in the first round, and maybe he's a player that you can put out for cheap and get a deal on early on. So I would say it's probably better off for you to have a plan on players that you want to attack in that time where the market is not set, because that, I think, is where you're going to probably get the most bang for your buck, if you're really playing it right.
No, yeah, absolutely. Like if you're playing it right, like you're gonna be more mad at yourself because you're like, man, I should have stayed in that bid because like I could have got Brian Thomas Jr. for a freaking song, but blah 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 got him instead, and here I am trying to get Nico Collins instead, and Nico Collins is already $2 or $3 higher, and the bid's still going. So it's all about the nomination strategy of trying to figure out when to nominate that player. Everyone's got all that money, everyone's excited to spend it. Like you have $200, Mark. That very first player comes out there, you're gonna put it up. You're gonna say, you know what, I'm gonna get that money out there. Let's get more money flowing. That value is too good. I'm gonna hit bid. I'm gonna bid again. Keep bidding until I say, okay, you know what, I'm good. If someone else bids me on that, I'm fine. But yeah, going out of line and trying to say like, oh, I'm gonna nominate, let's say Chris Olave right now. He played a few games last year, but missed most of the season. He's a low end type of wide receiver. Still young, yes, but throwing him out there that early, it doesn't benefit you, because at the same time, if you throw him out that much later, he's probably going to go for around the same cost.
Right. I just think it doesn't provide the right information for you early on. Like you can get that information later on, and it's still probably going to be at the same price. I don't think you're going to drive that many dollars out of the room by nominating Chris Olave when everybody has money.
Yeah.
So like I think you're better off, if you want to get money out of the room, you need to dominate the players that are worth the money, right? So I would say take the big ticket, big dollar players, and again, try and find one or two that are a little bit underrated in your view, and see if those players that you're nominating can get you a little bit more of a value, because you're willing to kind of go on a limb out for them.
Right. And then like when you're going on a limb, like, you're trying to figure out, should I keep doing this? Like, is it really worth, driving up the prices? Do I keep doing this, or is it time to just say stop? In my mind, I don't believe in driving up prices unless I have it budgeted in my price line, where I say like, yeah, like this player's in this tier, I'm willing to spend that kind of money. Yes, I will keep going because I know I can afford them, It's not going to break my bank. But if it goes over $1 or two, then I'm starting to get nervous. But outside of that, I'm like, at a certain point, I'm like, you know what? You want him that bad, he's yours. You can take him for $65. How do you feel about that, Marco? Of like bidding them up on the prices of players?
Yeah, I think if you're willing to bid up a player, you should still want them to fit in your roster and your budget. So I'm not the one to often recommend just driving prices up on players. Really, what you want to be able to do is like if you know a league mate has a tendency and you want to exploit that a little bit, you can do that. I think that's fine. But for the most part, I'd still be just trying to play my own game. Especially if you have, players, say you've already got your wide receiver one. Like, there's nothing wrong with throwing out more wide receiver one material out there for other people to spend their money on so you can kind of bring that price down. And hey, like, no one's saying that in that process that if those players are out there that you're not starting to bid early and often when the price is really cheap, because ultimately, like, if you get them for what you're budgeting your wide receiver two for, that's great. Once you get to that limit, though, you should really kind of stop, or at least kind of like pull back and let other people take the lead, and hopefully the momentum just kind of carries them to a place where the price is right. I'm not really that afraid if people get deals from time to time. It's going to happen. You can't get everything. You can't win everything that's going to happen in the draft. You can't win every hand at a poker table. It just doesn't happen. But I think that when if you are aggressive when the bidding is in your favor, like again, if you don't need a player, bid when they're really cheap. Bid and make sure that everybody else sees, yeah, you should be bidding on this player. But once it gets to a point where like you can't afford it or you already have it so you don't need it, you don't need to be the one who's sticking your neck out and sort of sacrificing your roster. So yeah, what I would say is bid aggressively early while it's cheap. When it gets closer to fair value or to your budget limit, back off, let other people take it, and at the end, if you want to make a final decision after the bidding dies down on if you want to take the player or not, you have it. And I don't really feel like you need to be the one who adds that extra dollar or two to the room just because it feels good to stick a player with a few extra dollars on somebody. It just doesn't make as much sense to me. I think you can really bid players up with just like your natural momentum of bidding. You should be bidding and active all game long, so people feel like they have to keep bidding and being a part of it. Because I think making sure that you're on means everybody else is going to feel like they have to be on, and maybe if they're not ready for that, then they can kind of stumble a little bit. But if you're trying to just, okay, I'm going to get a few dollars out of the room because I'm going to this player is at $48. I want him to get to $50. Well, okay, if that happens and you end up bidding $50 and you already have a $50 player, you've sunk your roster too. So it's not really worth the extra risk just for those extra few dollars. Just let the draft take its course. If you don't want the player, you don't have to bid on them.
Exactly, yeah. Like you should bill on players when you know your budget can't handle that. Like you have two players and you spent $50 on each one, $100 out of a $200 budget. Your budget's half spent, and you still have a roster to fill it. Two players isn't going to do it for you. So, like looking at your roster, you're gonna be like, "Oh my god, I totally screwed up. I wish I didn't do that." You need to catch yourself before you get in those bidding wars. That's when you need to start bailing on players. It's like here, like, all right, I spent this much more on this one player. I'm looking at my par sheet. I adjusted. This guy's already $10 more than what I can afford or what I'm comfortable spending, and this guy bids me $1 more. I'm bailing right now. That's fine. Let him take the victory. Let him feel like, oh man, I puffed my chest out at you and got it. Yeah, your league mates might come around to you and say, oh man, just bid $1 more on him. Bid $1 more on him. It's like, no, I'm not going to do it because I know it's going to mess up my whole entire roster going forward. It's not worth it to me.
Right. I mean, knowing when to get rid of a player and when to bail on a player is really going to be dependent on its situation. I mean, the less you need the player, the more willing you should be to bail on that player when the price isn't good any longer, or it doesn't fit your budget. There's nothing wrong with conceding that. Even if you want the player, sometimes you just have to come to real terms and say, this price is too much. It's not enough. It doesn't work for my situation right now. I already got, CeeDee Lamb earlier. I can't spend this much on Puka or whoever, right? You can't necessarily say, oh, but I want them. I need it. You need to have a more disciplined mindset when it comes to that. But on the other hand, the other situation is if you need a player, like the more that you need them, the more willing you have to be to paying a premium on them. If you're one who really feels like you need at least one good running back, and there's only one that you're willing to concede to be your RB1, you're going to have to be willing to pay a few extra dollars to get them on your team, or go without, and that's not a great option either. So it's really dependent on when you have to bail. Again, I think it's more need dependent. I think again you need to have a reason for everything, and you shouldn't just be bidding arbitrarily. You shouldn't be bidding because this seems like a fair price. It also needs to fit your budget. It needs to fit what you've actually built in a team already, and what you can sort of withstand to get yourself to the end of the draft.
No, absolutely. And that like leads us to our last thing of like nominating a random player that you don't want or have any interest in, but it will help possibly drain funds. Like you and I have come to agreement now that tight ends are not really worth it, no matter if it's tight end premium or anything like that. Brock Bowers, he's being listed as tight end 1 in Dynasty right now. He can go for a pretty penny based on exactly what type of quarterback they get. There's rumors of Sam Darnold, we'll use as an example, possibly signing with the Raiders. That could boost up his draft costs. He could be pushing like back when Kelsey was dominant. Pushing close to like $30 in total when you can actually buy a tight end who actually could be a lot cheaper than that for like half the price. Like you say, like a David Njoku or someone else to pair with it. So now I'm naming like a player like Bowers, knowing that having a repeat year might be well worth it, knowing that trying to get that tight end 1 to repeat as tight end 1 is pretty much near impossible. Like we've only seen it happen a couple times, but it's very rare that it pays off in the long run. Like, how do you feel about nominating like random players that you have no interest in, or do you always have interest in every player in some way, shape, or form that it doesn't matter? It just boils down to the cost of what it starts going out.
No, I think having players you don't have interest in is probably good after either if you want to spend like if you do want to drain money from the room. I don't think there's anything wrong with nominating players you don't want. Again, I don't really like to spend on running backs, so I'm happy to throw running backs out there when I need to get myself back from lower stack to one of the higher stacks in the room. But I would say for the most part, while you have your nominations, you want to be able to use them effectively. So I don't really like having to throw out players that I'm not going to have interest in. I want to make sure that I do have some players that I want to bid on for the most part, but then it's kind of more like an exit strategy when you either have less money to spend and you want other people to kind of get down to your level. I think that's also like, it's a good time to just, I guess really if you have like if you don't have a tight end, I think that's really a good way to go about it. Instead of like nominating random players, I kind of go with where have I not spent money, which is usually running back and tight end, and maybe quarterback, because quarterback you can stream, and there are a lot of good quarterbacks this year, so I might try to and get some quarterbacks for $1 or $2. That's when I would throw out. I'd throw out maybe a quarterback, or I'd throw out maybe a tight end that I like that I can get for under $5. I'll put them out there, and then other people can go for it. Once I have a tight end or a quarterback, I'm not doing that anymore because I don't want to back up more than likely, unless it's at the end and nobody has money. But you know what I mean? I'm not trying to drain money when I've already kind of made my quarterback. So you really got one shot to get the quarterback and the tight end. Once they're bought and you got them for that cheaper price, then you got to move on. But I would say, yeah, if you have no interest in top end players, I don't see anything wrong with throwing them out, but I do think they're going to get thrown out anyway. So I'm more likely to want to throw out at least guys that I'm willing to compete on. Not just players that I'm throwing out. I know that they're going to go. I think it's fine strategy, but again, you only are in control of so many of your nominations, like in the entire draft. So I think it's important to have it serve a purpose to you more than just people are gonna spend. And people can spend, they will, um, but sometimes it's also good to for it to fit your needs more than anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, don't be pushing the limits. Like, if you start like seeing the limits of like players of like bidding on it, you're like, all right, you know what? That's too low. I'm gonna bid on him. Like, yeah, but I know this guy needs him. Like, he'll bid another dollar. It's like that's when people pull the chair out on you too, because they think like, oh no, that value is too low. I can't let him go for that low. You bid another dollar. You don't need that player, but you got him anyways. You don't want to be doing that either. You got to be careful of trying to think like, oh, I can push it one more dollar, knowing that they're not going to flip it.
Right. I think if, again, I threw out the scenario that like this might be something that you want to try to do when you need to get down to a lower stack, but also that's why nominating players that you know you want to get for cheap, throw out some cheap options there. And then if people spend on them, that'll drain a few extra dollars from them. It's not going to be a ton again with quarterback and tight end unless you're on those top tier players. But you can get all those quarterbacks out of there. You can get your decisions kind of made for you because people are willing to spend in those spots, and it is answering questions on the market for you as well, so you can kind of learn from that.
Yep. And that's what's nice about auctions. It's continuous learning. Do you want to go in win now? Do you want to have productive struggle, or do you want to basically just be ready for the rookie draft? That's how to me. That's how it all boils down to. What 3 months do you want to go into with?
Yeah, I'm never one who wants to be the one for the rookie draft. I will trade my picks almost every time.
I try to do it. Most people want to give like nothing for them though. I'm like, not for the 101. Maybe this year though.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll be talking about rookies soon enough.
Oh yeah, I'll be coming up here soon. Well, that'll do it for me tonight, Mark. You got anything else, bud?
No, I'm dry here now.
Yeah, I think we nailed everything pretty much on that one. So we'll wrap this one up, and we'll catch you guys next time.
See ya.